Joining us now, Sheriff of Norfolk, Sheriff Bob McCabe. Hey, Sheriff, great to have you with us.
John, good morning. Thanks for having me.
If you're outside the Norfolk area and you're thinking about living in your city and you look at a current public school system, Sheriff, where 70% of the public schools are underwater academically, they're not accredited, they're not meeting standards. 62% of Norfolk public school students are on subsidized meals, which means you have a poverty situation. So you have poverty, you have a terrible education system right now, and you're running for mayor. These, to me, are the two biggest issues. What is Sheriff Bob McCabe going to do in order to deal with that?
Well, John, I'm glad you pointed those out because those are my two main priorities. And that's one of the reasons one of the main reasons I got in, because as I've sat back and I've watched over the last several years, I think our priorities need to change. And our schools, as a young policeman, I remember there was a realtor named Joan Gifford, wonderful lady, and I was a very young policeman. She was employing the Civic League to please get with City Council to do something about our schools to improve them, because they couldn't rent houses, they couldn't sell houses to our service people because they got orders to Norfolk, and even before they physically got to Norfolk, they were told if you have school-age kids, you don't want to live in Norfolk, you want to live in Virginia Beach or Chesapeake.
Right. And
that was 34 years ago. And, unfortunately, I don't think a whole lot of things have changed. The good news is we've gone from 70% to 60% unaccredited. So I always try to look at the glass half full. But, I've been kind of running since last July as the common sense candidate that wants to talk about and attack problems that affect everybody's everyday lives. And so, it's schools, it's public safety. Those are the two biggest issues, and those are the two biggest issues that the people talk about. One of the fortunate things I have, and I'm glad you kind of mentioned, what sheriffs are known for. We do a lot of things in the community. I was fortunate enough to be taken under the wing by the Virginia Beach and Chesapeake Sheriff 22 years ago, and you can probably tell I'm still enthused, 20 years later, because I love getting out in the community, love doing things with our youth and our seniors. And the number one issue, no matter where you live, is crime in the neighborhoods. People don't feel safe, and our schools and the educational challenges that we have, but also the schools not being safe. That's the number one teacher complaint. Not salary. You would think it would be pay, which is right up there, but they don't feel safe teaching in our Norfolk public schools, in our middle and high schools, and that's a shame in 2016. So those are the they're not the sexy things that you'll hear other folks talk about, but those are the things that matter. Those are things that are going to make people move out of Norfolk because of either the crime or the schools, and I want to reverse that. I want people to come to Norfolk. Norfolk's a great city. There's a whole lot of good things happening in Norfolk, and I want to make sure that we turn around that perception and reality of what Norfolk is, because it's a great city. I was born and raised here, and we can do it. We got good people here. We got good people that live here. We got good people that work here, and so that's the nexus of why I'm running.
Okay, so, Sheriff, you want to do something about it. Andy Protegiro's been there. He wants to do something about it. Nothing has happened. Mayor Frame wanted to do something about it. Nothing happened. And obviously Kenny Alexander wants to do something about it. What specific steps would a Mayor McCabe take in order to improve the public school situation right now in Norfolk?
Well, I'll tell you, you're right. One of my opponents has been on council 6 years, and he wants to do a lot of things now. But, my question is, and these are all good guys. Kenny and Andy, good guys. We all get along. And no negative campaign on my part, never will be. But when you've been in an institution for 6 years and you talk about what you want to do if you get elected to a higher position, you have to kind of look at the record. One of the things that people can look back, when I took over a jail, the Justice Department was in there, the FBI was in there. We've turned that around into being probably the worst jail, one of the worst jails in the country, to one of the best places to work in Hampton Roads by Inside Business since 2010. So I'm more of a doer than I am a talker. When we talk about our schools, one of the things we have to look at is salaries. First and foremost, with the salaries, teachers make $7,000 more starting in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake. So we have to bring our teacher pay up in Norfolk. Teachers do not feel valued nor appreciated. I can say that about public safety as well. One of the other things I've looked at over the last several years is there are community schools models, and especially when you have a diverse background, poverty and so forth in a community, people say schools are to teach and that should be it. Well, that's in 2016, that's not good enough anymore. Community schools model, what it is, John, is kids go to school during the school day, and then they stay at the school, and they get the wraparound services, whether it's sports, whether it's music, whether it's mentoring, whether it's SCA, any of those things. But it also includes health services, medical services, dental services. There's a model down in Nashville that's been working for about 3 years now, and the graduation rate has increased from 66% to 82%. And the discipline with the kids has improved. Now, when you talk about, that sounds all well and good, but how do you pay for that? There are grants out there. There's also businesses that will step up and invest. And I think we can do that right here in Norfolk. If businesses are confident that their investment is actually doing some good, and that's one of the things we have to get over to them, then I think we can have businesses step up because it's in their best interest to try and make these schools work and have and produce some workforce-ready kids, when they get out of school. And so schools is such a big deal because we can talk about economic development and bringing business and companies in, but what do they look at? They look at three things. They look at how are the schools, how's the crime, and how's the cultural arts. We got the cultural arts in Norfolk.
You got that one nailed. You got one out of the three, no question.
We got that one, and we do good at that. But, now as a mayor, we're not going to run the schools, but it's a third of our budget. $315 million was this last budget. But instead of just meeting once a year at budget time and saying, okay, the schools are asking for $8-10 million because of the shortfall, I think it's incumbent upon the city council to have regular meetings. And as mayor, I'm the only one that, if I win, I would retire as sheriff, and I would keep a full-time schedule, but I wouldn't sit behind a desk at City Hall and just kind of do things from there. What I would want to do is I would have the city manager run the day-to-day operations of the city. That's what they're supposed to do. But the mayor and the council are supposed to provide vision and leadership and guidance. I would be meeting with folks in the neighborhoods, out in the community, which is what I've been doing for 22 years, but I'll be doing it in a different capacity to maybe make more of a difference. I'll be going to different places around the city and doing live chats and going into different coffee shops or restaurants, having a weekly radio show, not to compete with you, by the way, but to me, it's about communication. It's about selling Norfolk, and it's about telling the story of Norfolk. There's a lot of good things that are going on, but we never hear about the good things because all we hear about is the bad things. We need to work on those bad things, but we also need to make sure that we talk about the good things.
Well, Sheriff McCabe, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. So if I understand what you're saying as mayor, you're saying that right now one of the school issues is that the starting pay for a Norfolk school teacher is $7,000 under Virginia Beach. I mean, that is a huge sum of money, obviously, so you're not attracting the best people. Of course, paying for that becomes the issue. So what I think I've heard you say is that in lieu of increasing taxes, you would be willing to personally go out and get businesses to fund that gap, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, not to fund that gap, because that's city government's responsibility. What I'm talking about getting business to invest in is doing like a community schools model. For instance, John, for the last 12 years, not just this is an election year, for the past 12 years, I've been doing free summer camps for kids. most of these kids, underprivileged, wouldn't be able to afford to go to a camp. We do a 1-week sports camp. We have 5 one-week camps where we do archery and we do, personal hygiene, and we do arts and crafts and those type things. We actually bring teachers in and so forth. I've been doing that for over a dozen years, and we target that middle-aged school, 10 to 13, 14 years of age. Now I started a foundation years ago, and I have businesses that help fund that. It's small in nature, but we also buy school uniforms. We work with the schools. I've been providing for the last, I think it's 6 or 7 years, scholarships to each of the 5 Norfolk public high schools for kids, and we get the nominations from each individual school. So it's something that I've been very passionate about. I was fortunate enough to be put on the board of Juvenile Justice by Governor George Allen 22 years ago, and I was on that board for 6 years, and we oversaw, all of the juvenile services and so forth in the state. So, the juvenile side, it was the last assignment I had on the police department. I was a juvenile detective in charge of all the truants and runaways in Norfolk before I became sheriff. So, I've got a long history of this, and I've got a long history of staying engaged. So this is not just something I'm, talking about because it's an election year to do for mayor, but we really need somebody who is going to take the bull by the horns and actually do something about the problem. And so for me, money, I don't think we need to raise taxes. I think we have enough money. I can't even tell you how much, probably waste there is in any department, really, in any city, in any locality. So taxes is raising taxes is not an issue. We just did that raised the real estate tax 4 cents not too long ago.
Sheriff McCabe, I want to get back to the teacher pay gap because finally somebody has identified for me one of the issues why Norfolk Public Schools are failing to the extent they are as compared to other schools. You got a $7,000 pay gap. If you got a teacher with an average starting salary of, let's say, $35,000, I mean, $7,000 is 20% of their income, all right? So certainly you're going to go to Virginia Beach or Chesapeake or somewhere else. However, how are you going to pay for that? If you're not going to raise taxes to fund that gap in order to bring teacher salaries up in order to get competitive so you can start fixing this issue, which really I think you've identified, everybody has, it's at the center of why your city is failing long term. How do you get the money to do that?
Yeah, one of the first things you have to do is the schools have to identify savings. The schools haven't exactly done a great job at managing money. How many millions did they not spend in money that they got from the federal government? So they have to look at their savings first, and then when they come to the council, after they have done that. But that's when you stay in an engaging process during the year. Then you can you can make decisions, but we don't communicate with our school board. The other thing, it's the same thing with our police officers. The police officers are woefully paid inadequate. We had 83 policemen leave the city of Norfolk last year. So those are the things that I want to focus in on like a laser beam to say, okay, we need to work with the schools. We don't run the schools, but now with the city police, we need to fully fund our police department. Fill the vacancies, and we need to make sure that we pay our police and we don't, hold their salaries hostage through the years, and then all of a sudden they're making so much less than the other cities.
Well, the other plan that you have, which is also a revenue issue, I think it's a great idea, which is make parking in Norfolk at night free. I mean, that's a big deal, Sheriff, because there's times where even my own family, I think about going on date night, taking my wife there, and I just don't want to deal with, parking, paying $10, paying in the behind. When I can go to Chesapeake or Virginia Beach, I don't have to pay anything. It's a good idea, but it's going to create a funding gap. We're out of time. I do want to have you on again in next week so we can go over some of your funding ideas, and also we didn't get a chance to touch on crime. But for this segment, we're out of time. More information, go to bobmccabeformayor.com. Hey, Sheriff, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, John.